My name is Chuck Jennings, the interviewer. Mr. Bashline, could you please state the period of service that you were in?
Sure. I went to officer training school in 1970. Went to active duty for 7 years, left in 1977. I was in the United States Air Force.
And the highest rank you acquired during that time?
During that time, captain.
And where did you serve at, sir?
Well, a number of different places in that short period of time. After all the training, initial training was completed for pilot training and the survival schools, I was assigned to the C130 Hercules, which was going to be based in CCK Air Base in Taiwan, where we deployed for up to 3 weeks or so in country, meaning Tan Son Nhut Air Base in Vietnam, Utapao, and Nakhon Phanom in Thailand.
Before we get into that, maybe we cover a little bit about your history. Where did you start out in high school, and what did you do or went to college?
Well, I'm a product of the mid-'60s in the United States, and as most people are aware of, the Vietnam conflict was underway, and when I graduated from high school in 1966 from Grove City, Pennsylvania, the Vietnam War was still underway. However, I was accepted at Grove City College. That would last 4 years, and most of us who graduated in the mid-'60s counted on, or at least assumed, that the Vietnam War would wrap up certainly within the 4-year period I would be in college. However, that was not necessarily the case, and throughout my college experience, the United States continued to draft young men and women into service, and eventually this turned into a lottery system, and each draft board would decide how many people that they were committed to draft based on lottery numbers, apparently to try to make the system as fair as possible, so there would be no perceived favoritism in the draft issue. I ended up with number 40, which was pretty much a lead pipe cinch that I was going to be drafted. So while I was still in college, I already flew airplanes, a small aircraft, privately. So I knew I enjoyed flying, so I went through the process of applying for Air Force Officer Training School, hopefully to be accepted in their flight training program, which in fact did occur.
During that period that you got accepted into your flight training program, maybe you could speak on how you got there, what were some of the things that happened while you were there?
Sure. Basically, while in college, the Air Force gave us officer qualifying tests, tests to determine whether or not you would be suitable to fly, and then certainly a pre-induction physical, which for aviators was very thorough, concentrating really mostly on eyesight and some of the obvious issues relative aviators. But once accepted, I was given orders to go to officer training school at Lackland Air Force Base, where once you graduate, you're commissioned to second lieutenant, which was a requirement for pilot training. And then I was assigned to Columbus Air Force Base in Mississippi, where we trained in three of the typical aircraft that all Air Force aviators trained in at that time, starting with a single-engine reciprocating aircraft called a T-41, which in the civilian terminology would be called a Cessna Skyhawk. Once finishing that short course, which was mostly just an introduction to flying and an initial weed-out program, we were assigned to the Cessna T-37 aircraft, which was a side-by-side twin-engine trainer, where we learned more about aviation in general, how to navigate, a little wee bit of formation flying, and then some instrumentation flying. After graduating from that program, we moved on to the Northrop T-38 Talon, which was a tandem two-person supersonic aircraft, which I think was everyone's favorite, really. They spent a lot more time in formation activity, and it was our first opportunity to experience supersonic flight, which really is, without instrumentation, you really wouldn't know. There's no, the pilot doesn't hear a sonic boom and doesn't have any kind of a jolting effect in the aircraft. It's simply an aerodynamic feature of a wing relative airspeed. So kind of a non-event, really. But pilot training was very enjoyable, and out of pilot training, they make your assignment based on class standing. And I think I ended up somewhere around the middle of the class.
Once you completed that, did you go to any survival schools or further training?
Well, I did, and I'll give you a little background on that. While having finished the pilot training program, before departing Columbus, Mississippi, we had to choose which airplane we wanted. So by the time it was my turn, I looked up on the board to see what was left, and there was somebody had taken some chalk and drawn a picture of an island with a palm tree on it. And I inquired as to what that was, and they said, well, that was going to be an assignment for someone who was interested in some island flying, and it would be in the Pacific Rim region, and the aircraft involved would be the C130 E model. And I thought, okay, that's a great idea. So back in those days, of course, few people wanted to volunteer for Vietnam duty for several reasons, and I wasn't necessarily opposed to that, but I wouldn't say that I was the first one to raise my hand when they said who'd like to go. But as it turned out, this assignment was actually to this CCK Air Base in Taiwan, formerly known as Formosa, and strictly and only just a staging base for in-country Vietnam-type activity. So by taking that assignment, I virtually volunteered to go to Vietnam. So in a way, it got me in the end. But we'll talk about that a little bit in the future.
Before you went over,
survival schools.
yeah, a little bit, just if you had any experiences there while you went through survival school, a little bit what it was like.
Sure. Typical survival schools for almost all pilots included water survival training at Homestead Air Force Base and basic survival training at Fairchild Air Force Base in Washington. Those of us who were going on to the in-country theater, Vietnam, jungle survival was in our future, so we were sent to the Philippine Islands for jungle survival training. The Air Force survival training was really excellent training. Some of the best instructors I've ever met in my experiences over the years came from those schools and the scenarios they presented. Excellent information. One experience I thought was kind of interesting occurred in the first survival school at Homestead Air Force Base, the Water Survival School. To try to make this not too complicated, they gave us some parachuting experience by strapping a parachute on us on a small flat top type boat, attaching a lanyard to our chest, which extended way out in front to a speedboat. And when they said ready go, the student was to start running toward the speedboat, which was also toward the end of the flat top boat, and hopefully you would achieve enough speed to inflate the parachute, and the result would be the parachute would pull you high off the boat up to approximately 200 to 300 feet. At that point, we were to employ certain procedures that anybody parachuting out of an airplane would have to perform. One of the procedures, however, was we had to disconnect ourselves from the tow rope. Okay, well, one of the fellas became confused, and instead of disconnecting himself from the tow rope, he disconnected himself from the parachute, and he had about a 200-foot ride down to Biscayne Bay, which, since he survived, became a source of some humor. The other survival schools pretty much were straightforward. When I went to survival school in Fairchild, one instance that comes to my mind that, as I look back on, was kind of humorous for me, a little bit my luck. It was snowy, and we had to cross a small stream. And to get across that stream, which is just a little bit icy and not enough ice to support our weight, we chose to cross over a rather large fallen tree. Well, as each and every person made their crossing, the residual snow that was on this fallen tree began to become slippery. And in fact, by the time I made my attempt to cross, had become icy. So midway across, I knew that I was going to take a swim, so I tried to go in a controlled fashion, and I found myself through the ice up to my knees in freezing water. So they dragged me out, and the issue with survival training in a winter environment is to shed your clothing rapidly and try to become dry. The whole operation to become dry was the most important and significant situation to avoid hypothermia. So, of course, the guys helped me strip down to the nude, actually, and we pulled out. It was late in the training, so one of our troops unloaded his pack, and I got to wear his 6-day-old underclothes and so on. So memorable experience at survival training. Jungle survival was very straightforward. I can't think of anything at that school that would be overwhelmingly interesting, other than how do you eat, what do you eat, what is safe to eat, and so on. Only one thing I can remember is if you watch a monkey, if you find a monkey and you eat what the monkey eats, you might be safe. And then if you have an opportunity, eat the monkey.
After those schools, then you went for flight training on the C130E?
Yes, I went to Little Rock Air Force Base to train on the C130E model, which was the 4-bladed version with 2 external fuel tanks on it. And then after that, I went right over to the Philippines for the jungle survival. And then on April 1st of 1972, I landed in Taiwan to begin my familiarization with in-country Vietnam procedures, and as a co-pilot on the C-130.
Roughly how long a time did they give you to get acclimated to operations that you would be doing in Vietnam?
Well, really, we went right into a high threat mission into a place called Kon So actually, training was you go along with an instructor, but you still fly a typical mission. And the mission at that time was that since the North Vietnamese Army and the Viet Cong were insurgent in the Central Highlands around Pleiku and various other locations in South Vietnam, the mission of the day there was to provide tactical support, if you will, on a logistical basis with the C-130, and then remove their accumulated refugees. Since these were high threat areas, we flew these missions mostly at nighttime. We can get into this in a little while, but basically that was the in-country check, and it just happened to be, the timing was that it was, those were some of the most high threat missions that I flew in the entire year. So right off the bat, some quick training.
Did you continually fly out of Taiwan, or did you finally get based in Saigon, or?
Yeah, the way that worked was about 3 weeks each month. Crews from Taiwan would either fly a plane or deadhead on an aircraft into Tan Son Nhut Air Base in Saigon, and some would split off and go over into Thailand, Utapao Air Force Base. If you were in the Tan Son Nhut and South Vietnam theater, you could occasionally fly a mission that would take you in and out of Thailand, but because of parking space for aircraft on the ground, they'd split them between the two bases. You could fly intra-country, however. You might find yourself in northern Thailand, even though you had originally deployed to Tan Son Nhut. But the missions, I'll elaborate a little bit now on the missions for you to give you some idea of a typical day. Let's go back to the Kon Tum issue in the Kon Tum Highlands, or Kon Tum Valley, was in a rather deep valley surrounded by, of course, mountainous terrain. And because the North Vietnamese were fairly well established, our operations required that we operate under the cover of darkness. So the C-130 was a very appropriate aircraft to support logistically the needs of the area in respect to ammunition, fuel, food, troops, and then again refugee evacuation. The typical scenario was to launch 6 aircraft from Tan Son Nhut Air Base and fly in formation to an entry point that we would all use to make our run into Kon Tum, and that would be one at a time. When we arrived on station, a C-130 gunship called a Spectre gunship was usually on station, securing the area with 105 howitzer fire and 50 caliber machine gun fire. Those were early in the days of infrared sighting capability, so they could actually make accurate assessment of ground troop movement and secure areas for us as best as possible for our landing. So how would we conduct this? Well, since the runway was short and there was really nowhere to park, we only landed one aircraft at a time. But as a final security measure, we would take an extra loadmaster with us, a crew member who was in charge of loading and offloading pallets of cargo in the rear of the aircraft. We would take an extra one of those individuals with us, one to help the primary loadmaster with his assigned duties relative to the cargo, and then also we chose an aircraft to be a ground fire troller, so to speak. We would open up a troop door on each side of the aircraft in the aft cargo compartment. We would secure one of the loadmasters in each opening with a rather large flare gun as a way to avert an attack by a shoulder-launched missile, back then referred to SA-7s and Grails. The objective was for them to observe a launch on the aircraft as we proceeded on a low pass over Kontum's airport. And if they did detect a launch, which certainly would only they'd be able to do with eyesight, in their judgment, they would determine when they would shoot off this flare, and hopefully this heat-seeking missile or infrared-seeking missile would tail off after the flare versus tracking the aircraft and eventually impacting the aircraft. My experience is that none of our loadmasters ever detected this, but however, it was a ground fire trolling effect that is operation for the first aircraft through. So it also was a way to detect small arms ground fire as well, which we always had plenty of that, and no way really to overcome it. The major concern were the shoulder-launched missiles, because we were going in anyway. Once the trolling aircraft was had made the pass, then one at a time, our navigators, through a process called airborne radar directed approach, would align us with an unlit runway, and then at about 300 feet on our approach, above the runway, we would turn all of our lights on, which had been previously turned off to avoid detection. We would turn those lights on and look for a painted white stripe on the runway, which we would attempt to land prior to. There were actually two lines, and they were on the first few hundred feet of the runway, and we were pretty much assured that we'd be able to stop the aircraft in these short, fairly unprepared runways if, in fact, we could touch down within the confines of those two lines. In C130 lingo, this is called an assault landing. So that always went quite well. At about 300 feet, we turned the lights on and made a rather controlled crash, if you will, onto the runway, and then we'd turn our lights out because there would be some oil pots at the end of the runway lit up on either side, so we could just aim for the spot between those and stay on the runway, since there were no painted lines on the runway to follow, and this was certainly under the cover of darkness. So we go up to the end of the runway, and we would either offload cargo, that could be anything from the ammunition, maybe 20,000 or 30,000 pound fuel bladders, which would be create an awesome event had one of those taken a tracer while we were on the ground. Never heard of that happening, however. Other aircraft were, while they were on the ground, were actually hit directly with mortars, but not while I was actually on station. Mortars did fall, and a lot of ground fire was observed. Nothing hit, however, to our good fortune. Then perhaps the most emotional issue with the Khartoum experience was the refugee evacuation, which certainly, if you can imagine, a four-bladed propeller-driven airplane with its brakes on, trying to load literally hundreds of people in tattered conditions and terrified that one, would they be able to leave the area, and two, would they be able to leave that area with their families intact. I'm certain that many did not leave with their families intact simply because the aircraft would become fully loaded, and the loadmaster, who was in charge of the entry door for the passengers, had to decide when to close that door. And he really didn't have much choice. And certainly people watched family members fly away, most of whom we removed to Pleiku in the Highlands. Of course, when other aircraft, presumably when other aircraft performed the same refugee function and then returned to Pleiku, hopefully these families were reunited. But it certainly was a very difficult situation, and my loadmaster came up one day sobbing that he couldn't get the door closed in the back because people were clinging onto even the latches of the door. So let's imagine for a second one of the horrible situations where we were taking ground fire and these people were grasping whatever they could to get onto the aircraft, and we ordered the loadmaster, you must close the door now, or we stand the chance of losing everyone. So I'm sure he had to go along stepping on some fingers to try to remove these people from that door, and I'll just leave it up to your imagination as to what happens if, in fact, they continue to hold. So not a very pleasant situation early on in my experience in Vietnam.
Was there an experience at Song B?
Yes, there was. Song B was just north of Saigon, and it was another one of our high threat areas. The most unprepared airfield I've ever landed an aircraft on, except privately back here in the States on sod. But to take a 4-engine aircraft and land it on steel matting called PSP, I think, was quite an experience. And Song B was, the perimeter was pretty much secure, but still outside the perimeter, surrounded by insurgents, Viet Cong, etc. I don't think there was any, at that point, regular North Vietnamese army, but certainly a threat area, nonetheless, with ground fire on approach. So we employed a technique called speed offload, where once we landed and went to the end of the runway to a designated area to offload the pallets of cargo, we would open up the ramp and the door in the aft of the aircraft, and the loadmaster would unlock the pallets, which slid along a rail on either side of the aircraft. And then when notified by the loadmaster that he was ready, we would employ full thrust and scoot out from under these pallets, if you will, and they would just fly out the back of the airplane. This was a technique used when the threat was so imminent that the aircraft was in imminent danger, and we needed to speed the operation up a little bit. We still had the issue of raising the ramp and closing the door so that when we were on takeoff roll and rotated the aircraft nose up to lift off, that the aircraft would not in fact rotate into the back ramp, and thereby prohibiting an effective rotation. In fact, this did occur in Khartoum at one point. Aircraft did not make an effective departure, and did fly, kind of skid off the end of the runway at full takeoff speed, driving through residences, I suppose you would call it. We called them hooches. That aircraft burst into flames, and my understanding is that several of the crew members were killed in that event, and I think one of them is wearing a silver star today after rescue attempts of some of the crew members. But that was a speed offload technique. One thing I noticed on my first approach into there was the effect of a direct mortar hit on a PSP type runway. These are metal runways, and this this mortar left a crater and just a wrinkled piece of steel. One positive aspect of the PSP runway was that these were in small enough sections so a couple of individuals could actually replace these rather quickly, and the operations could continue.
When you were also at Songben, did you see an arc light?
Actually, we observed an arc light. What is an arc light? An arc light is a B-52 bomber run, and we were on a mission recovering to Pleiku, Thailand from the north somewhere. And we started to receive an emergency beacon, which we assumed was a downed pilot whose parachute containing an emergency locator beacon had been activated because he had perhaps bailed out of the aircraft and parachuted to the ground. So we selected a direction finding DF function of our primary communication radio, which one of the functions of the radio in general is that it monitors what we call a guard frequency, so that we can avail ourselves of warnings by various agencies to avoid certain areas that might in fact be subject to one of these B-52 arc lights, for instance. So in other words, it was a feature for us to avoid an area that was going to be under either artillery fire or a bomb run by somebody. However, when you select your primary comm radio to this DF function so that you have a needle that points at this beacon that is being sent out by the aviator's parachute, you remove the guard function of the radio. So if in fact you are on this search and rescue type mission, you're going to miss any of these notifications that are referred to the area that you may be flying. So that is what happened one day. We detected one of these beacons, we selected the DF function of the comm radio, and we turned the aircraft around toward Kontum Valley during the day in an attempt to try to locate the downed airman and effect a rescue. However, simultaneously with our selecting the DF function, we missed a report on the guard frequency that would have notified us that at the same time we had started this search and rescue function, a B-52 arc light was commencing right up the valley, right toward us. So I have a number of slide photographs of this event, but as we are steering toward this beacon, our engineer grabs us both by the shoulder and points out to us that in fact we're flying directly into this arc light, and perhaps it would be prudent at this point to turn off course for the time being, which in fact we did with a rather an aggressive maneuver, but not so much that I still couldn't snap off a few pictures.
Excuse me. Then around Christmas time, you ended up in Thailand.
Well, that was kind of an interesting way to spend my first Christmas in Southeast Asia. For some reason, the U.S. built a 12,000 foot, 10 to 12,000 foot long runway in the middle of Thailand, in a very remote area, near a community called Nam Phong. As it turned out later, a group of Marines actually were based there, but I didn't see any but one of them who actually Christmas morning invited us to breakfast. But what happened was that we were offloading some cargo, and when we attempted to restart the aircraft, our number 2 starter failed, and we didn't carry any spares, and it was Christmas Eve. So we made a call on HF radio to our command post, which we called Mother, and asked if anyone was in the area who could deliver a spare starter to us, and we had the ability to exchange out these starters, and then we'd start the aircraft and we'd be underway and head down to Utapao for our Christmas dinner. Well, that didn't occur, so we spent the night in approximately 100-degree weather on a metallic ramp, trying to find a way to eat and sleep. And it wasn't until morning that we saw another human being other than a crew member who happened to be standing over me with an M16, trying to get my attention to see if we were interested in some breakfast. As it turned out, the breakfast facility that he took us to was a small Quonset type hut, a metallic half moon shaped kind of a hut where there was breakfast for literally a battalion of people, none of which we ever saw. Not sure what their mission was. Kind of an interesting way to spend Christmas Eve and early Christmas Day.
Later on, did you pick up a Bob Hope show in Thailand too?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what day it was. The Bob Hope USO show was still very active in the early 70s. Even though Bob was aging, he still supported our troops in every way he could. Highly respected comedic individual who has since passed on. I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to witness one of his shows at Utapao Air Force Base in December of 1972. It is also occurred during the time that President Nixon was trying to create an ultimatum for the North Vietnamese by a bombing campaign, a B-52 bombing campaign of Hanoi and the surrounding area. That bombing campaign took place even on the evening of the Bob Hope USO show, and several of the takeoffs were loud enough so that the resonance from all of that actually stopped Bob's show, at which time during one of the breaks between takeoffs, he turned around toward the flight line, raised his fist and said, "Give him hell, Buff," because hopefully this was going to culminate in the end of the war, and the Paris peace talks would progress a little bit more rapidly, since they seem to have stalled out at this point. Also interesting to note was that at that point in the Vietnam War, not a necessarily positive note, the B-52s came back pretty shot up, and I think we lost approximately 14 B-52s and most of the crew members, some of which did survive being shot down by mostly SAM missiles. the reason people were quite disgruntled about the operation was that the pre-strike turns and the post-strike turns were generally located in the same place for several weeks, and this made it rather easy for the North Vietnamese surface-to-air missile crews, SAM crews, to determine where to aim and then have some effective strikes against our B-52s. One item of information they needed was altitude, so they knew when to time the explosion. And the way they accomplished that was they would get MiG pilots, North Vietnamese MiG pilots, to fly up to determine what altitude the B-52s were located, and then they would call in the altitude, and through the computer systems that were available for the SAM sites at that time, those numbers were injected into the system, and the SAMs were quite effective against our B-52s. And some of the techniques about pre- and post-strike turns became significant issues after the war.
At some point, you got involved with the Philippine flood evacuations.
Actually, our unit became involved in a Philippine flood evac. Philippines, I suppose anybody could go back in history and find out that at some point in the early 70s, the Philippines suffered a devastating flood, and our unit was given a Presidential Unit Citation for its support of the evacuation of many of the personnel, indigenous population of the Philippines until such time their properties were suitable to be returned to. And at some point I flew some mission in support of that, but it was quite an extensive mission supported by the entire unit.
At that time, did you leave the Southeast Asian theater? For what years? You were saying it was 72.
Yes, and most people had the experience of spending a year in Southeast Asia. You had the opportunity to go back if you liked for another period of time. I chose to change aircraft to come back to the States. That occurred in late March of 1973. So I spent approximately 1 year in country, and then headed to training in Merced, California, specifically Castle Air Force Base for Strategic Air Command's KC-135 pilot training program. After the pilot training program for the KC-135, which had the function of air refueling, I was sent to be based at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, with the 17th Bomb Wing and the 922nd Air Refueling Squadron. The air refueling mission, I did not fly in support of Vietnam issues. Mostly by the time I got to Dayton, the war was over, and that was 1973. The armistice was signed, I believe, sometime in late January or early February of 1973, and I can relate with you a story that occurred in very early February 1973, digressing a little bit back to my tour in Vietnam, where we were tasked to fly to Hanoi and make a landing at Gia Lam Airport, where supposedly most of our supposedly where the Hanoi Hilton was located, or very close to that area. The purpose of our mission, because it followed very closely behind the signing of the armistice, was to effect a transfer of North Vietnamese personnel to Saigon in order to determine what activities would take place in this more peaceful environment. Some meetings that occurred that I was not privy to, but we eventually, after sitting on the ground for approximately an hour and a half at this airport in Hanoi, redeployed to Saigon with a full contingent, that is, cargo compartment full of North Vietnamese personnel. Nothing really significant to report to you about the Hanoi experience, except to say that as we taxied in, I was very curious to see what those bombings of December had, what effect they had on the airport, as anyone would suspect that that would have been one of the targets. And if it wasn't, then there were some errant damage in the area that had been replaced mostly by just filling in the holes. But buildings, none of the buildings had any glass, and there was an awful lot of frag damage to all of the concrete constructed buildings. And we noticed a few old Russian aircraft there and so on, but really not much activity at the airport at that point. The airport did serve, after the 130s went in to bring these folks back to Saigon to effect the war's end, this airport was utilized by C-141 aircraft and crews to repatriate American POWs. So I feel fortunate to have the opportunity to have gone in there to help with that scenario.
Yeah, at one point, I see that you were a research pilot, test flight C-135Bs, NKC-135s, C-135As, EC-135Ns. And after that, you went on to a mission for NASA?
Yes, we're going to make kind of a quantum leap here. From Vietnam to past the KC-135 unit. The 135 unit, the refueling unit, the 17th Bomb Wing, disbanded in 1975, so I only spent a year and a half. At that point, I needed to move on. I ended up as a C-135 air research pilot at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for the 4950th test wing. The test wing was establishing a C-135 test bed aircraft unit at Wright-Patterson, which was moved up from Patrick Air Force Base. There were 25 or so aircraft that were utilized in several functions. 8 of those aircraft were the NASA aircraft funded to support the Apollo's moon launch missions. I came after that, and the most significant mission that I supported was the launch of both Voyager space probes in 1977. They were launched in 1977, a few days apart, and to the best of my knowledge are still out there cruising through the cosmos, hopefully someday to be encountered by what we refer to now as alien life, who may be able to extract something about planet Earth and its inhabitants. So I feel very fortunate to be part of that operation. At that point, I was finished with my active duty commitment, and I moved on to the air refueling wing in the Air National Guard in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and flew there until 1983. My highest rank achieved was Major. I decided at that point to leave the Air National Guard and raise my family. And all in all, I ended up with 13 years military experience.
Then you got a job with the airlines?
Yes, at that point, I had already been hired by United Airlines and been furloughed by United while I was still working at the Guard. And I moved over to U.S. Airways, where I, in 1980, until I retired in 2007. At U.S. Airways, I flew as a first officer on a DC-9, an engineer on a 727. Then at approximately the 6-year mark, I moved over to the captain's seat on a DC-9 and flew those for several thousand hours. The other aircraft I flew with U.S. Airways include the McDonnell Douglas MD-80, the entire Airbus family, the 319, 320, 321, and the international jumbo jet, if you will, the Airbus 330 on an Atlantic international operation to Europe. A very rewarding experience, and today, after retirement, I enjoy visiting the Butler PA VA hospital as a volunteer, and enjoy being a grandfather and retired.
How many grandchildren do you have?
I'm a new grandfather now of one grandson, Luke, who lives in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Future activity with aviation, I think, will be limited. After 25,000 hours of flying experience, I'm very satisfied that I've done some of the things in life that were important. Now it's time to do some of the things on the bucket list I think anybody would hope to be able to accomplish. I just flew a combat type scenario in Phoenix, something in a little prop airplane that I thought was enjoyable. So we'll be doing a lot more of those things, including some traveling.
Thank you, Doug. It's been an enjoyable interview, and I thank you for your service.
I'm quite happy to have had the opportunity. Thank you so much.